Hi, today we're going to discuss People First language and how it highlights the person, not the disability. People First language is a language that is used to communicate appropriately and respectfully with and about an individual with a disability, according to the CDC, emphasizing who the person is, not their diagnosis, which helps us not focus on the person's disability that could marginalize them towards segregation and limits positive interactions. People First language also demonstrates the power of words in promoting respect for all. By changing a single word or avoiding the use of particular words and phrases, we invite those with disabilities to join our educational environment rather than segregating them due to their perceived limitation. It also gives value to people and helps develop successful habits. Not only is it the individual with disabilities who feels empowered and valued through the use of People First language, but those around them develop more value for others as well and increase the potential for positive attention, positive attitudes, and interactions which can further enhance the learning environment. So why practice People First language? First of all, this practice can promote an inclusive culture in our schools by increasing the levels of positive interactions and openness of staff and students, but it limits interactions that can marginalize individuals with disabilities and decrease their desire to participate in the school setting. As many as 1 in 5 people in our schools are born with or develop a disability, including those with unseen disabilities that can be cognitive, sensory, or emotional. Considering that 20% of the students and staff you work with on a daily basis has a disability, certainly reinforces the relevance of practicing People First language. It will also help to prevent negative attitude and behavior towards those with disabilities. These attitudes and behaviors cause patterns of separation between groups and limit the learning environment on its effectiveness for all students. Furthermore, it ensures future success by promoting student value in themselves and for others, and could increase student desire to succeed in future classrooms, but also encourages an inclusive culture that will continue to harbor a safe and welcoming learning environment. When promoting People First language, it is important to recognize the current language in your school. A quote by Kate Snow that is a good depiction of what non-People First language is when a child screams retard across the playground for all to hear, he has chosen to use a word that will inflict the most emotional damage to another. I've made several statements on this page and highlighted words that are key to identify when looking at language that is currently being used that does not promote People First language. First of all, saying he is autistic is highlighted, which is labeling a person as their ability. Referring to it as the handicap stall, handicap is not the same as accessible and has become a term that is not acceptable in using to describe accessibility in facilities. Using terms such as midget, crazy, moron, etc. are offensive language that promote negative stereotypes towards people with disabilities. Pointing out she is in a wheelchair or he can't see simply highlights limitations of students rather than promoting someone as capable. Furthermore, stating that someone has overcome or suffers from is making a person into a victim or suggests that they are a success story based on their disability. This is a type of language that happens currently more often than we realize, but if we take the time to listen, we can capture these moments and ensure that we change our practices towards People First language. Putting People First language into practice, here are a few suggestions that I have that we could use to enforce the idea of making all learners feel valued. First of all, promoting and modeling People First language always. Not only do we need to incorporate this into our professional learning, professional development, and staff meetings as reinforcement practices, but it's something that we have to model every single day to reinforce the value that it carries. Secondly, understanding and knowing our students and being aware of people with disabilities. This goes beyond recognizing it when you see it, but could also come down to making sure that you properly analyze IEPs. Make sure you get to know students and families early on in your school year to make sure that you're aware of what their disabilities may be, and how you can facilitate their needs without drawing unwanted attention. Highlight the abilities and skills of individuals with disabilities. Rather than focusing on what our students with disabilities are unable to do, we need to promote what skills they do bring to the table and making sure that as we strengthen their confidence, they become better learners. Do not assume students with disabilities need assistance. Ask if you are unsure. Sometimes this can put students into awkward situations or make them feel uncomfortable and that you don't have the confidence in them to take care of certain tasks. If you're unsure, it is always better to ask, and if you feel you've offended one of those students, it's always best to apologize. Use has statements, not is statements. For example, he has a visual impairment. As we identify students or as we talk about students with disabilities, we want to make sure that we talk about them as people who have been diagnosed. We don't want to talk about them in terms that they are what their diagnosis is. We can do that by making sure that we use has statements rather than is statements. Avoid conversations that marginalize and segregate students. This is important to practice not only with students, but mainly in conversations that we have with fellow professionals. We want to make sure that the conversations we have aren't promoting the idea that students are limited or that students are not part of our typical classroom. All students are part of our classroom. We need to make sure that we continue that idea. Promptly correcting language that is offensive and prescribed acceptable terms. Again, making sure that we're decreasing the negative attitudes and behaviors towards students with disabilities to promote an inclusive environment is our goal. We want to make sure that we have standards and guidelines set up not only with staff members but also within our classrooms to make sure that it's not a norm to use language that is offensive or derogatory towards other students. Finally, implementing a staff and student people first language compact or contract. This is a practice that we can utilize to ensure that we are not only practicing people first language, but also modeling it daily and making sure that it's a visual standard that we are changing our perceptions and the things that we do and making sure that we practice people first language.